Hey, what's up guys? Radku here, back with another Yu-Gi-Oh video. And today is going to be Zombie World. Now this deck is super cool, and most of these cards you can get in the Zombie Horde structure deck, despite the fact that it is probably one of the most expensive structure decks out there. Now, this is super cool deck, and most of these cards can be picked up in that structure deck, but some of them are a bit unique, and I really love this deck's play style of being able to renew from the graveyard so well. And this deck is surprisingly very combo centric, being able to put out multiple negations and being just pretty strong in general. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Starting things off, I play 2 copies of Doom King Baladrock. Now this card is super good. It renews itself every standby phase, and I realize it doesn't say your standby phase, it says standby phase, so that means you can renew it during your opponent's standby phase. And if a card's in the field zone, which this deck revolves around the spell card Zombie World, so it's really important. Plus, you have multiple ways of searching out. You have cards like Necro World and Terraforming to search it out, which are both really easy to use, which means you're basically playing 7 copies of Zombie World in the deck. But Doom King Baladrock's effect is once per chain, when a zombie monster activates an effect, which Zombie World turns all monsters into zombies, including your opponents, then quick effect, you can apply one of these effects. Negate the effect or banish one monster from your opponent's field or graveyard, which can be really good because you can negate effects and banish their cards on the field to disrupt their plays, or you could banish some of their most powerful cards. Plus, these are non-targeting effects, which gets around a lot of cards. This is probably like the best boss monster I've ever seen in any deck thus far. Like, I legit think that this is better than Cleafort Towers in terms of versatility, because the Cleaforts weren't very combo centric, but this is so powerful. Like, and on a 2800 body that recurs every turn, you can basically lock your opponent out of playing if you have 2 Doom Kings in your graveyard. Then I play 3 copies of Uni Zombie, probably one of your best cards in the deck as well. Basically anything up here in the 3 copies to 2 copy range are your main combo pieces. But you can do combos with the other cards, even though that doesn't work as well. Uni Zombie's effect is you can target one face-up card on the field, discard 1 card, and if you do, increase that card's level by 1. So the discard effect is actually really good in this deck because of your graveyard effects being able to trigger even if they're discarded, which is really good. Then you can target 1 face-up card on the field. That monster cannot attack for the rest of the turn except zombie monsters. Also send 1 zombie monster from your deck to the graveyard, and if you do, increase that target's level by 1. So the good thing about this is that it can turn this card into a level 5, which means it's a prime target for Necronized, on top of the fact that it can send cards to the graveyard, which I was playtesting this deck, and I ended up sending Necro World to the graveyard after he destroyed my Zombie World. So that meant I was able to renew a Zombie World, and I was able to get some graveyard set up. Then I played 3 copies of Glow Up Bloom. I would play 2 copies of this, but I felt like it was really good. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from your graveyard and add 1 level 5 or higher zombie monster from your deck to your hand, or if Zombie World is in the field, you can special summon it. So this is really important because you're able to search out Zombie World super easily. Again, you're playing basically 7 copies of Zombie World. So if you have Zombie World on the field, you can instantly summon a Doom King Baladrock off of its effect, which is really powerful. Then you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of the turn except for zombies, which, I mean, the whole deck is zombie, so it doesn't need to worry. Even the hand traps or even Ash is zombie, and Ghost Ogre is not zombie, but it's fine because, I mean, it doesn't really matter. 3 copies of Mizuki, probably, like, every time I watch a Dual Logs video, he says that this is the best zombie card, like, ever printed, even over Doom King Baladrock, which I disagree, but I still think it's one of the best cards in this deck. You can banish this card from your graveyard, then target one zombie monster in your graveyard, special summon it. And with this deck having so much versatility in the graveyard, being able to summon any card from the graveyard is so good. You don't really need to draw into this to use its effects, but it's still pretty good. 2 copies of Gozuki. I didn't want to play 3 copies, but I still think it's pretty good. During your main phase, you can send one zombie from your deck to the graveyard. Then if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can banish one zombie monster from your graveyard, except Gozuki, special summon one zombie monster from your hand. So the difference between Gozuki and Mizuki is that it has graveyard setup versus hand setup, which Gozuki has a steeper cost, but I think the effect to send to the graveyard, like you could send a Necro World, would be really, really good. And then I played 3 copies of Necro World Banshee, definitely mandatory, and I'd say it is the single best combo piece in the deck. It's more of an extender, because if your zombie world gets destroyed, or if you don't open with a zombie world, you can banish this from the field or graveyard to summon, or to play a zombie world directly from your deck, which means it cannot be ashed. I want to emphasize that. It won't be ashed because, or I mean, it can be ashed, but you're activating it from the deck, which would bypass a ton of effects. So it can be ashed because it has it in its name, but there are other things that it can get around. 3 copies of Chunli Solitaire. Not most people don't play 3 copies of this, but I thought it was really good at 3 copies because this can do a lot of crazy stuff. It can summon a Uni Zombie from the deck, which would send a Glow Up Bloom. These are your 2 targets for it. Although you can summon Ash for some. No, you can't summon Ash. But you could summon Unizombie and Glow Up Bloom, which is really, really good. You don't really have any others in the deck other than this, but that's not a 0 attack. So these are your 2 prime targets, and they both work really, really well. Especially since you have link monsters that you can go into. So that means that you have these cards and that they can be good pieces for combos. Then I play 1 copy of Taxa Necro. If this card is normal summoned or set, if this normal summoned or set card would be used as synchro material, 1 monster in your hand can be used as synchro material, which is pretty good. Then if you do this, all materials for that summon are banished instead of being sent to the graveyard, which some of your cards do have banishing effects, but it doesn't really matter because you're using cards from your hand to synchro summon, and you have plenty of synchro monsters to use. Especially some really powerful ones like Red Eye Zombie Necro Dragon, which gains attack for every zombie in your graveyard and on the field. So, it's really, really good. Then I play 1 copy of Jacko Bolon. This is just a free special summon, and you can target 1 zombie monster in either graveyard, special summon it, but banish it when it leaves the field. That means you can use your opponent's materials, if you have Zombie World on the field, as material to go into link summons or even synchro summons. Then I use 1 copy of Vampire Fraulein. This is really good if you want to beat over a card. This card is just generic zombie support, even though it does work in vampire decks. I didn't really like the vampire playstyle, but this card works really good with this deck. It's a free special summon. If your opponent, or when a monster declares an attack that includes you, you can special summon this card in defense mode, which, keep in mind, it says declare an attack, so since there's a chain, you can just call not attack after the chain resolves. Then, once per battle, if your zombie monster battles an opponent's monster, During damage calculation, you can pay life points in multiples of 100, max 3,000, and then your battling monster gains that much attack. So that's really good. You can get a ton of attack off of that, and like if you already have cards on the field like Jacko Bolon, or if you're extending your plays with Doom King Baladrock, you have a zombie Frawling to beef up your monsters, and they're gonna have a minimum of 3,000 attack. You can make your glow up bloom really powerful with just one vampire Frawling. I play one copy of Endless Decay because one, it can trigger off Zombie Necronized without having to worry about Uni Zombie, as well as the fact that if you have 2,000 or less life points, you can special summon this card, and then if this card is normal or special summoned, this card's attack becomes half of your opponent's life points. Which once this is based off of one of my friend's decks. So when he used this card on me while I was really close to OTKing him, but he had a little bit of life points left, and it was the first few turns, and he summoned this out, 4,000 attack, just destroyed me. So it's really powerful if your opponent's just chipping away at your life points like crazy. But yeah, it's pretty good as a one of. Again, contribute or can use Necronize. 3 copies of Ash. Funny enough, it is a zombie card, even though it doesn't really matter because you don't really have a ton of cards that are like, oh, you can only activate zombie cards for the rest of the turn. But I mean, it's still kind of cool to have a zombie card. You could summon it with Hulk, I guess, but there's no real point because you have Taxa Necro. And then I play 2 copies of Ghost Ogre. Again, this is based off of one of my friend's decks, so I kept the ratio of hand traps the same. 1 copy of Terraforming to search your zombie world. This is actually pretty good, even though you do have Necro World. Just like in case you don't draw into all of them, you have multiple ways of getting into your zombie world if you draw a Terraforming and a Necro World. Then I play 1 copy of Monster Reborn because, I mean, graveyard deck, duh. 3 copies of Zombie World, definitely the most important card in the deck. It turns all your cards into zombies, and the reason that this deck is so good is because you have cards like Doom King Baladrock, which can negate the effects of zombies, but when all of your opponent's monsters are zombies, that means you can utilize it so good. Then I played 3 copies of Super Poly. Might seem weird, but then you have to think about the fact that this is a zombie world deck, so all your opponent's monsters are going to be zombies, which means that you can summon the Dragon Necro Nether Soul Dragon. Which is really, really good. Even though it's not a great card in terms of just play style in general, it's still really easy to summon and a pretty good card. You could cut this down to 3 in place of another zombie Necronize, but I liked it at 3 in playtesting because I could use it really, really effectively to get rid of their high level monsters. Then I play 2 copies of Zombie Power Struggle. Target 1 zombie monster on the field. Until the end of the turn, it gains 1,000 attack or loses 1,000 attack. Then during your main phase, if this card is in the graveyard, you can shuffle one of your banished zombie cards into the deck, and if you do, set this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. Similar effect to Necronize. If you control a level 5 or higher zombie monster on the field, target 1 monster your opponent controls, take control of it until the end phase. Then it has the same renewing effect where you can return a banished one to set it back on the field. Which, I mean, I personally like Zombie Power Struggle just because even though it's only 1,000 boost, it's still pretty good. Plus, it can weaken your opponent's monsters, because losing 1,000 attack could be the difference between destroying a monster, and that's really important in this deck. So that is it for the main deck. Main deck is very, very solid, and I really, really like this deck. definitely has a ton of combo potential. Even if you just buy one of the structure deck, you can still make a pretty effective deck. And if you want to cut out like Super Poly in place of another Zombie Necronized, that would be pretty smart. Either way, it's a very solid extra main deck, and let's move into the extra deck. 2 copies of Vampire Sucker, 2 zombie monsters, pretty generic. It has some pretty good effects. Um, if if you would tribute a monster for a tribute summon, you can tribute a zombie monster your opponent controls, even though your opponent your even though your opponent do not control them. Which is to say that you can tribute their monsters to give yourself a monster. Then you can only use the effect once per turn, which is fine. You're not going to use it a ton, but if you want to summon like a Falling, an Endless Decay, or even a Doom King Baladrock, you can use your opponent's cards, which is really good. And then you can target one monster your opponent controls, special summon it to your opponent's field in the graveyard, but it becomes a zombie monster. It's already a zombie. If a zombie monster is special summoned from the graveyard, draw 1 card. So you can only use each effect once per turn, which basically means that it's a free draw. Because it becomes a zombie monster, then since it was special summoned, you get to draw a card. And you'll most likely already have Zombie World on the field, so pretty good. Then I play 1 copy of Avendred Savior. This card isn't very good when it comes to this, but I put it in here just because it's another zombie target. Plus, I play it for its second effect. During damage calculation, if this card battles an opponent's monster, send 1 zombie monster from your deck to the graveyard. That opponent's monster loses attack equal to its level times 200. Which can actually really help your combo plays, because on top of weakening your monster, you can summon out a Doom King Baladrock during their standby phase and then lock them out pretty well with that. That's why I really liked this card as a one-of, but I wouldn't play it anymore because the rest of the cards in the extra deck are definitely better. 1 copy of Access Code. This deck can do Link spam, despite the fact that it's more of a Baladrock control. 1 copy of Hulk, because this deck plays a lot of tuners, like a lot of tuners. So this deck can effectively summon out them and go into combo plays. 1 copy of Link Ross, just because I wanted to. Plus, this deck does do synchro spam a bit, so that means that you can use that to go into some higher synchro monsters like Sun Saga. 2 copies of Shiranui Samurai Saga. Just because generic synchro monster, you can play Pot of Extra, but because this extra deck isn't needed, but it's still really good, and I wanted to max out on Draco. Then I play 2 copies of Red Eye Zombie Necro Dragon, just because this card is super powerful. Gains 100 attack for each zombie monster on the field and in the graveyard. And keep in mind, even if this deck goes second and you activate a zombie world, your opponent's going to have a ton of monsters in the graveyard, because the top deck right now is Dragon Link, and Dragon Link leaves like a million cards in the graveyard at the end of the turn. Then when another zombie monster is destroyed by battle, you can special summon 1 zombie monster from either graveyard to your field, which is really important because you can summon out, like, if they're playing Eldritch, you can summon out their Golden Lord, or you can even summon out some of their, like, other really powerful monsters, even if they're not playing Eldritch, which is really cool. I mostly play it for the effect to gain attack, because you're not going to go into it a ton, so I wanted to play them, but they're kind of just spot holders. But it's still a pretty powerful card. Then, finally, 3 copies of Draco Nether Soul Dragon. This is probably the most important card in your extra deck, next to Vampire Sucker, because, this card's, isn't really important for its attack and defense, or even its effect. The only reason that it's important is because it requires 2 zombie monsters, and it becomes zombie with Zombie World. But the reason this is so important is because you can use Super Poly. If you have Zombie World on the field, that means all your opponent's monsters are going to be zombies, which means you can use Super Poly and then completely wipe their field. Plus, Super Poly is spell speed 4, which means that your opponent can't do anything against it, which means that you basically instantly wipe their field. So that is pretty much it for the deck. Please like, subscribe, share, comment, let me know what you thought, and let me know if there's anything you would change. Again, I feel like Super Poly might be a bit bricky, but I really did like it at 3 copies, and you might want to cut out Zombie Power Struggle if you're not really in need of that. And that is pretty much it, and I will see you in the next Yu-Gi-Oh video. Peace, guys.